So once again, welcome to the sessions of the Hassall Family History Association. And it's the 23rd of September of 2025. And tonight we're going to be hearing from Spencer Lawry and Sue Lawry. And before we do that, they've asked that I just give a short presentation about the Hassall Family History Association. So I'll just do that quickly, and I'll put a slideshow on. And hopefully you can see the three main goals of the Hassall Family History Association. We have three simple goals, and the first is to foster and disseminate research on the life and heritage of Roland and Elizabeth Hassall and their descendants. The second is to encourage historical research on other early settler families. And the third, which we haven't yet moved fully into, is to draw insights from Hassall family history about contributions to culture and innovation in contemporary society, because we notice that with so many descendants, not only in Australia, but New Zealand and in other countries, that many of our far-flung relatives are leading fruitful, positive, innovative lives and making strong contributions in all areas of contemporary society. Those are some goals for further on. Now, this association was established to celebrate a 1998 bicentenary of the arrival of Roland and Elizabeth in early colony of New South Wales. And we have more recently held a reunion in 2023, which marked 225 years. And in addition to those larger meetings, we've decided to meet every 5 years. So the next reunion will be 2028 in a format still be determined. But we've also developed a number of activities that are held on an ongoing basis, project areas in transcription, genealogy, heritage, research, and reconciliation, as well as having a newsletter and a website which is under development, and these family line meetings. Everybody's welcome to join in these various activities. So we're using software, Family Tree Maker for a genealogy, and a couple of our members keep that up to date as best they can. We also look at Hassall Heritage, which is sites, physical sites, properties, inventories of artifacts and portraits, etc. And we have had a large transcription project in place, starting with the State Library of New South Wales, where there's 8,000 pages of family papers are held. But we're near the end of that project, and we're moving on to other reservoirs of family papers that can be transcribed and made more widely available. There are many sites in which our papers, photographs, and artifacts are available, and also museums in which they're placed. That's large museums and smaller regional museums as well. And one of our hobbies is to try to find locations that are named after family members. It would be interesting to see if this has also occurred for family members in New Zealand as well as in Australia. We're taking note of the graves of the first and second generations in the first place, to ensure that those graves, not only we know where the first and second generations are buried, but also the condition of their resting places, so that we can properly pay tribute to them. And in this case, we note that Mary Lawry is buried in Cova in Cornwall, England, and Walter Lawry in Parramatta in Sydney. One of the more recent subjects in Australia is reconciliation. In this colony, there was quite a distance between the white settlers and the traditional owners of the land, and the Hassall family is concerned at trying to understand what our family connections have been to First Nations peoples, and what we can do to work toward an understanding and reconciliation between us. And we look forward to hearing what the situation was in New Zealand and elsewhere. This is some of the Melbourne Hassalls who have recently been involved in a truth-telling commission and sharing their experience as descendants of some of the early settlers in Victoria, James Hassall in particular. Now, all of this research leads to publication as much as possible. There are some existing books, but we hope for future books, whether it's narratives or whether it's simply selected letters that we can share, as well as bibliography, and certainly autobiographies and other types of documentation. So we're really at early stages of documenting the first, second, third generations of our family. Those of us on the line tonight are probably 6th, 7th, 8th generations from Roland and Elizabeth. We find that there are family papers in a great number of historical bodies around the country. And again, we're really at the beginning of this. This is some references in the State Library of New South Wales. And you'll see that in particular, there are Samuel Marsden papers, the Walter Lawry papers, as well as many others. And to my knowledge, no one has systematically been through these papers for our family purposes. So there's much research still to be done. When we look at the government records, we have all the early colonial records, which include, for example, all the land transactions and, for example, access to convict labor is all documented here. And again, we haven't finished the homework on that. We have a wonderful site in Australia called Trove, which is the newspapers online, which nobody has reached the bottom of when it comes to material on the Hassall family. And we know that in New Zealand, there's something similar in papers past. And so when I look up the name of Lawry, we have here 6,300 references. Not that they're all quality references, you'd have to check them, but that's an example of the type of public access materials that are still open to us to mine as we write our histories. We also have a Facebook page. Everybody's welcome to join that page. It's a way to just share updates on activities and finds. So you're welcome to look for the Hassall Family History Association page. It's free, obviously, to join that. And on that, we also have our membership form, and all of our newsletters are available. So we have an association in which it's possible to join, and that's simply for the purpose of staying in contact with everybody. We're not trying to make any money at all, but we are trying to connect to as many family members as possible. So this is a general invitation to join in any of these activities if they're of interest to you. And with that, I'll stop the share of these slides, and we'll move on with our presentation. And we'll welcome Spencer Lawry to give us a presentation on Mary and Walter, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Well, thank you, Graham. Tonight I'm speaking about my ancestor, Mary Coble Hassall, who was the third daughter of Roland and Elizabeth Hassall. So I'm working from two books, that one there, which some of you be familiar with, some not, and that one there, which is about Walter Lawry. So those are my two sources of reference. This one I think is out of print, but I think it's available secondhand, various places. I'm not sure about that one. So firstly, Mary Coble Hassall was the fourth child of Roland and Elizabeth Hassall, born in Parramatta, Australia, 1799. Just a bit of background. Her parents and two young boys left England in 1796 to travel in a small group of missionaries to Tahiti. Initially, they were welcomed in Tahiti and had their third son in Tahiti. After about a year, things went very sour when the missionaries would not trade in muskets. It resulted in them fearing for their lives, and they escaped on a visiting ship and travelling to Sydney arriving basically destitute. So they arrived at Port Jackson in Sydney. So that's essentially the background, and the book starts on her 17th birthday, and she's starting to go forward from there. It said, if it hadn't been for the kindness of some of the people of Sydney, particularly the Anglican clergy, Reverend Samuel Marsden and their good wives, I don't think we would have survived. Mr. Marsden let our family stay on one of his small farms just north of Parramatta and used the fruit and vegetables there. We found father a job as storekeeper at the Commissariat Department at Parramatta and Toongabbie. And I had to look up what on earth that was. And apparently that's a government store that provided any goods and services to the activities committed connected to the government. So it'd be supplies to the prison and supplies to things like ships coming and going, ship stores, which is very important, and supplies to soldiers who are watching over the prison quarters, and any other supplies that were needed that were on. Some of them were rationed, for argument's sake. And I think that's quite an interesting story there. When the previous storekeeper was found to have been a thief, when your father was given a grant of land, Mr. Marsden gave him seeds for planting and breeding stock to begin his own little farm. The Marsden family have been our closest friends ever since. And she goes on to say, of course, father and mother did not go back, and did not go back to Tahiti. Since his coming to this country, father has changed from being an anxious refugee to a confident man who has earned the trust of others. He began with 2 small grants of land and another 100 acres with hard work and care and the help of convict labour, and it appears that convict labour was used quite a lot in the early colony, which I think is probably a good thing. So he's built up excellent farms. He used to trade in all sorts of goods, and even when I was only a little girl, we already had a carriage. Men of property entrusted their land and affairs to him when they were away from the colony, as they saw in him a very rare thing in a convict settlement, an honest man. And I think it was, from what I read, a very rare thing indeed. He was proud to be among those who came free. Governor Macquarie once complimented father on his family and said he had written to England to say how much he admired the young people born here. So that's what happened to them when they arrived, basically destitute, provided with a good job, and it worked well for the family. So we move on to and going to say the context of Mary's life was primarily within missionaries and clergy. So that's the background that everything happens. This evening I sat quietly in a corner of our crowded best parlour and wondered whether I had just made a terrible mistake. There he stood, such a good, respected young man with his Bible open in his hand and such an earnest expression on his face. Have I made a terrible mistake? Ought I to have said, thank you very much? I would be honoured to be your wife. Will I have another chance to marry a fine Christian man like Samuel Lee? And Samuel Lee was the first Wesleyan missionary that went to Australia. Living here in a colony with so many convicts. Governor Macquarie once said of New South Wales that half the population had been convicted of crimes and the other half ought to have been. Samuel Lee is a very good man, I'm sure, and he would be a virtuous husband. But then she goes on to say, is this the man that God has chosen? I'd rather wait and see. So fairly early in the story, she's just turned down an offer of marriage. Go a little bit further, we find that her brother Thomas, the oldest one, who she really admires, is going to England to study theology in Wales. And they had their various farewells and so on. She was very fond of Thomas. After the Sunday school farewell, Thomas left Parramatta and went to Sydney to board the Kangaroo, but his ship did not sail immediately. All of our family went to and fro between Sydney and Parramatta as the days of waiting dragged on, and one day I made a remark which hurt Thomas very much. At last, with tears, I brought myself to write a painful apology. The trouble between us was over a girl. Perhaps I'm jealous of any girl whom Thomas might like. I'm hard to please, thinking that no girl is good enough for him. No one is. But that particular girl, I won't name, was certainly not the girl I would like to see Thomas marrying. So I said so, and made my antagonism quite clear over quite a long time. Poor Thomas was hurt by my critical attitude, but that particular girl was an awful example of the difficulties of being brought up as a missionary child. And hello, Barbara. This is
hello.
One of the factors that weighed very heavily in Mary's mind was the fact that being exposed to different cultures and being brought up as a missionary child in a different culture, the child often had a choice of which way they'd go, and some remained faithful to their parents' beliefs, and some completely rebelled against everything that their parents represented, both morally and spiritually. So we see here that Mary was quite strong of opinion as to the suitability of this particular young lady. Incidentally, the day after that Thomas sailed, this young lady eloped with someone or other, and the marriage lasted about 7 months when she was spectacularly unfaithful to him. So that was probably one that Thomas was spared. Further on in the book, she goes to meet Mr. Lawry, and she was quite impressed with Mr. Lawry. But apparently Mr. Lawry's been preaching at a service, and I think it's was a little bit of a problem for Mary. She goes to talk about Mr. Mary. That man is so vain, talking about Mr. Lawry. Seeing him after chapel, surrounded by young ladies, all twittering and giggling and gazing at him with cow-like eyes, and the vain creature is enjoying every moment of it. Such popularity and flattery must surely be extremely bad for him. Those girls are just like a flock of grey and pink galahs, or rosellas, decked out in their most vivid feathers, hopping around him in a flock, squawking, "Oh, Mr. Lawry, such a splendid story, Mr. Lawry. Oh, you are so amusing, Mr. Lawry." One of these days there will be a great fluttering of parasols and fans, and the entire flock of them will fly up into a gum tree. So what do I care? Well, in fact, she could care quite a bit. He's only a perfectly ordinary human being after all. Most certainly he's not perfect. For one thing, his emotions go up and down like a sailor in the rigging, and no one ever knows whether to expect him to be gloomy and depressed, frivolous and full of mischief, or serious and very earnest about the fate of souls. So one thing leads to another, and they both basically fall in love with each other. And this particular point of time, Mr. Lawry's been quite sick. And while he's sick, he's written down in his diary what he describes as 7 ingredients, what was involved in seeking for a good wife. Firstly, a good natural disposition. Secondly, piety. Thirdly, good sense. Fourthly, good education. Fifthly, a healthy body. Sixthly, a loving heart. And 7th, a good economist. He further states the desirability of 1, beauty, 2, money, 3, respectable connections, 4, similarity of opinions, the same age and universal friends. So that was his little criteria. Elizabeth Reason goes, Elizabeth de Raylan goes on to comment, aware of the developing bond between Mary Hassall and Lawry, Lee is unable to hide his resentment, while an equally strong-minded Lawry is not timid in his evaluations of his senior colleague's failings, or his preparedness to test the limits of Lee's patience. Tensions between the two men deepen and become irreversible at this point, and more importantly, they begin to impact the mission. Lee was the first missionary to arrive. Lawry was the second, and it turned out that they were chalk and cheese. And there were two things that basically precipitated their disagreements. The first one was that basically Walter snatched the first prize from Lee, and second one will come to. They were so on the 2nd of November 1819, Walter Lawry marries Mary Hassall, and about 3 months after that, Samuel Lee sails for England. And 10 months later, Mary writes, 99. Walter and I have been finding great joy in loving each other and in sharing our home and our life with people. As we look forward to our baby, it seemed we had everything one could possibly want for contentment. Even father said of us there was never a pair lived more happily in the best things as well as the affairs of life. Then came the epidemic of the influenza epidemic. And she goes on to say that as winter wore on, a lot of people got unwell, and rumours were circulating that some people even died. And then she had a happy morning with her mother, but in the afternoon began to feel ill, miserably ill, with an aching head and throat and body, streaming nose, and a cough that tore me to bed. Out of the general wretchedness that night, a distinct and alarming pain separated from itself from the general weariness of my body, and I knew that my labour had begun. Walter, the baby, but it's too soon, much too soon. Oh, God, help me. So she basically said, I remember very little of the next days except the mist of faint and fear. Walter has told me since that I was in labour for 36 hours, and because I have helped at the delivery of other women's babies, I can imagine it all. So they ended up with a little girl, beautiful little girl. But she was quite premature, but reasonably healthy. Her influenza was weak. Sorry, her influenza was basically over, but she still coughed. Walter came in to me one morning while I was feeding Elizabeth, cradling her in my arms. He said, Lucy and Samuel babies was born last night, a little boy. He is not very strong. They want to call him Roland after his grandfather. And your father, Roland, he's ill. He's caught the influenza. Walter was away all next day, and while he was absent, Elizabeth became very ill. All the familiar signs of influenza were there in her premature infant, only days old, and she was shaken with violent convulsions. It was much later that night, when Elizabeth was resting more easily, that Walter held her gently and said, Mary, I must tell you news of the family. Two things, one good and one very hard. Jonathan and Mary's baby was born today, a healthy boy. They are calling from James. And your dear father died this evening. Excuse me. Only 2 days after we buried my little darling, our family stood for a third time at the graveside of the burial of Samuel and Lucy's baby son, Roland, aged 12 days. So at that particular funeral, Mary, I think, was just devastated and numb with grief. 3 months later, she does say, but one doesn't forget, but gradually life does go on. And next we find that Walter's will being read. At the time of his death, he owned 2,360 acres. Todd, what's that?
No, she said Walter's, it's all right.
Sorry, father's will has been read. Consisting of a number of farms with livestock. Each of us has received a portion. Walter is rather embarrassed about it. Father planned me to receive his big Parramatta orchard, a house, 200 acres with 3 mares, 50 cattle, 10 pigs, 583 sheep, and the great riches of £300 a year. As a married woman, I cannot inherit directly, and so does in my husband's name. But Walter says the Methodist missionary is not allowed to own property like that and should live on a stipend. But Mother and Mary say that those assets can be used to further the ministry, which is what in fact happened. And it was indeed a blessing in that respect. Then Walter gets in for a shock. Oops. A letter arrives to Mary's mother, and basically it says that Walter's name has been marked down quite clearly. New Zealand, S. Lee, that's Samuel Lee, one more to be sent. Friendly Islands, Tonga, W. Lawry, one more to be sent. And he says, Lee to New Zealand, what does that all mean? Me to Tonga? And he was in quite a state of shock about the whole thing. He said he hated this to be done to him because there was absolutely no consultation. Any man being asked to pioneer a foreign mission field is always asked whether he and his family is willing. He is not just ordered to go. There's no sign of planning, no party of pioneers to work together, no suggestion as to how I travelled 2,000 miles to Tonga, no mention of supplies or links with Sydney, just Friendly Islands, W. Lawry, one more to be sent. And that, one more to be sent, usually means that they would like to send someone if they had someone, which they haven't. And of course, the question then revolves around what about Mary? And so for quite a while, they discuss things about whether or not they're going to go to Tonga. And eventually they'll make the decision that they are going to go. So they leave Sydney and arrive initially in New Zealand on their way to Tonga because they're so tonight we dine with the Lees, who are already in New Zealand, the long-term missionaries and the Halls. But something had gone wrong in the New Zealand situation, and you can cut the atmosphere with a knife, apparently. One thing that hurt me most was the sad story of the Kendalls. Mr. Hall had made it quite clear he couldn't abide the Kendall, and the feelings seemed to be mutual. If they had known what that man was really like, they would no more have him ordained than his boot polish, she said. Apparently it was a very sad, tangled story. He was a brilliant man, very quick with languages and married, but he was a thoughtless husband who left his large family to fend for himself while he went to publish his findings in England. Apparently carry on. Mrs. Kendall, seeking comfort but finding disgrace through having a baby by another man during her husband's absence, Kendall himself a deeper and deeper involvement in Maori culture till his mind was full of pagan thought. A beautiful and intelligent Maori chief's daughter, available to advise on matters of culture, temptation, adultery, defiance, and refusal to repent, disappointment, disillusion, and destruction, not only for Mr. and Mrs. Kendall, but also for their tiny community who did not know what to do with their skilled but sinful brother and his plaintive little wife. And that proved to be a huge shock to Walter and Mary. The next thing they do is depart for Tonga. On their way leaving the Bay of Islands, which is in the top of the North Island, where the missionaries had been, as they were heading out, there was a war party coming back on their ship. They were leaving in a ship heading out, and there was a war party coming in. And Mary describes that there is a war between several Maori tribes, and the people of Hongi have been triumphing. Their great war canoes were passing by our ship, so close I could see the spiralling details of the carved figureheads, with protruding tongues of faces of awful ferocity, and the tall sweep of carved timber towering high over the stern. They were close enough for me to see the terrified faces of prisoners as they passed. With 80 to 100 people on board, they were 3 times as many as were on the St. Michael, the St. Michael being the ship that they had. The canoe came alongside, its sleek lines longer and perhaps more elegant than the bulk of the St. Michael. They were not threatening us in any way. I think they just wanted to show off their many captives. Almost without thinking, Walter tossed down a tin of ship's biscuits as a gift to the chief, and we were startled to see the chief grab one of the captives, a lad, and thrust him up over the ship's rails as a returned gift. The boy, whose name appears to be Manihira, has been crouching on deck ever since, staring out across the water on the beach. We too can see the war canoes beached. We can hear with him the screams as his fellow captives, his family, are being slaughtered and prepared for a cannibal feast. We can see the line of severed heads impaled on poles on the beach. And that was what they saw as they departed for Tonga. They arrived at Tonga 2 months later from leaving New Zealand and generally got a good welcome. And one of the surprises they had was that there was an Englishman there who had been left behind several years later, and he could serve as a translator for them, which was a big plus. A month later, the novelty was starting to wear off, and Mary turns 23. After 3 months, Mary miscarriages her baby, but she's secretly relieved because she did not want to have a baby in Tonga. But later on, Mary begins to worry about Henry, who's 18 months old. And this is the problem that's recurring, that she wonders whether he's going to start speaking English first or Tongan first, and it appeared he spoke a bit of each. She's concerned about whether he'll apparently he was quite happy to sort of be involved with all the Tongans, but Mary is quite concerned whether he'll grow up in his Christian faith or Tongan paganism. They start to worry as when will the St. Michael return, and she has another child on the way and does not want to give birth in Tonga. Walter is starting to get some progress in responding to his preachers, and 1 year on Tonga, the St. Michael returns. So supplies and mail have arrived. The St. Michael goes off trading around the Northern Islands for the group and promises to return in a month. Letters are read, some from his family and some good from his family and some bad from the London Committee, mainly criticising him in various aspects, generally resulting from the prompting of Samuel Lee. After 7 weeks, the St. Michael returns, and they're off on their way back to Sydney, 207. So she says, today we're in the sail for Port Jackson and home again, which she's looking forward to. Why did we go to Tonga? We thought we were doing the right thing at the time, but the whole expedition proved to be pointless, a waste of time, but has it proved to be pointless, waste of time, ridiculous bit of futility? Might we just as well have stayed home and saved our money and our effort? Did God may have a purpose in bringing us to Tonga, or did we just make a big mistake? 210. Talking about travelling on the ship. Travelling with a lively child who's nearly 2 has its own terrors. I've been very glad with the help of our Tongan friends, especially the Maori lad, Manihira, in caring for small Henry. Ever since the day when Walter impulsively threw a gift of ship's biscuits to the Mary cannibal chief and was rewarded with many hair, the boy has found comfort and healing of spirit in caring for our little one, Henry. Incidentally, ship's biscuits tins were about a foot by a foot by a foot, so quite reasonable sized tins of biscuits. One day recently, when we had been at sea several weeks, something happened which has given me nightmares ever since. Henry had dropped off to sleep in a coil of rope on deck, with many hair squatted nearby to watch him. In my chair further along the deck, I sat frozen as an unexpected wave broke over my child. It all seemed to happen so slowly in my mind. Or the wave, a flurry of limbs, the empty coil of rope unwinding. It was like watching a cut falling from a high shelf, bouncing down, knowing that the only end must be smashed fragments on the floor. I think I screamed. Before I could move, many hair it was overboard, and I saw two heads, one dark, one fair, bobbing together in the water. Then the Mary boy and Henry were being dragged aboard, dripping, and I was hugging them both in one warm, wet bundle of precious humanity. How I thank God for his mercy. So that was one particular pretty scary incident that happened on the way back to Sydney. 7 months later, they arrived back in Parramatta, 17 months after they left. 4 days later, Mary gave birth to a daughter, Elizabeth Anna. And the same month, Marsden returned from visiting New Zealand, and he had visited the Anglican missionaries for a start, and then he went to see how Samuel Lee was getting on back down a bit further south, and he found that Samuel Lee was basically completely burnt out, exhausted, both in mind and in body. Samuel Lee worked very, very hard. There's no doubt about that. He worked himself to the point of exhaustion quite frequently. However, the question of going back to England to meet the committee arises again because Walter feels he's been very unfairly criticised. So they do decide to go back to England. So after 4.5 months at sea, they arrive at Portsmouth in England. And after about 14 days, Walter was able to go and see the all-powerful fearsome committee. Initially, Walter received a very frosty reception from the committee, but after 2 days of discussions, his position was completely reversed, and they were very enthusiastic about his performances. So he felt very vindicated. After 18 months of arriving in England, they moved to Walter's family home in Cornwall. They soon settled in St Austell, and Mary is now 26 and has a new baby on the way. Walter's preaching in Cornwall has been very well received. Let's just read a bit about that. Let's see if I can find it. Keep the link for you on this other book, right? No, I can't see it. Anyway,
Right, yeah.
right. Apparently, Walter's preaching did go very, very well. And at one point he talked about being in a gospel meeting, and there was an old roadman there who'd been his job was breaking stones from the road, and he was apparently became very aware of his sinful nature and wanted to be reconciled to God. And eventually he prayed for forgiveness, and as a consequence of that, he accepted Christianity. But the other thing that happened was that apparently he was bent and twisted in his back. And to everyone's surprise, including Walter himself, he was straightened up completely. So his preaching was very well received. On the 14th of December, 1825, Mary Australia was born to Mary and Walter. And unfortunately, she hemorrhaged. And on the 25th of December, Mary Cover died from postpartum hemorrhaging. That area is very hard to read. So I just made a couple of notes about Mary Cover Hassall. There are two Mary Cover Hassalls in the family. No portrait of the one we've been talking about, but the second one is the daughter of Jonathan Hassall and the granddaughter of Roland and Elizabeth. And there is apparently a photo or portrait of her. There are two Mary Australias, Lawrys in the family also. One is Walter, Mary's daughter, and the other is Henry's daughter. So Henry had a sister and a daughter, both with the name of Mary Australia Lawry. So that's essentially where we conclude with Mary. So you want to have a break for any discussion or questions on that?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh yeah. Just to add to your mention about the Maori slave boy, Manahira. Of course, he became one of the two first Maori Christian martyrs in New Zealand.
Yes.
He went back to Taranaki from, I presume, from Australia. I think he got a boat back at some stage. And he was a well-respected Christian teacher in his tribe. And then he wanted to reconcile with another tribe. And that was where he and his friend Kiriopa were murdered.
Yeah.
But there was a reconciliation between the tribes after that. So it's a fantastic story. And the Anglicans have taken on those two martyrs into their own church history. So fantastic, really. Yeah.
Yes. Any other comments, or I'll move on to Walter.
Can I just ask a quick question? Like little baby Mary Australia, who was she raised? Like, did Walter have servants or something, or someone who cared for her? Because she would have been a really tiny baby, and it's probably a miracle in itself that she survived as well.
Yes. Well, I just found a page I wanted to find in the book. Walter's writing here, at the time, it seemed that all I had left were my beautiful children, now motherless, and my work. My mother and sister helped me with the little ones, and I poured all my strength into my work. So she was looked after in Cornwall by Walter's mother and his sister.
Oh, okay. So he had family over there. All right.
Sorry, I probably didn't make that clear, but yes.
No. I don't know much about this line, so I probably should have known that. But yeah, thanks.
No. Walter was, in fact, one of 8 children. Sometimes you ask how many children did someone have, and they'll tell you. And then the next question is how many survived into adulthood.
Yeah.
Walter's family, of the 8, only 3 survived to full adulthood. Around about 1811 and 1812, a similar epidemic went through Walter's family, and 5 of his siblings died, aged from 20, 15, 13, 9, and 2. So I think in that respect, he may have been able to help Mary a bit when her first baby died.
And Walter remarried 4 years after that.
Yeah, he did, yeah.
Thanks for that.
Right. Just going back to this book now, start on Walter. Hopefully won't be quite as long. Walter came from an evangelical Christian family based in Cornwall. Lawry is a Scottish name, but as far as I can trace back, in about 1650, all my forebears come from Cornwall. Just going onto this book. It says Lawry commences preaching around Cornwall, during which time he witnesses a number of stirring spiritual revivals, one involving hundreds of miners and so on. 4 years after Mary's passing, 36-year-old Lawry marries Mrs. Eliza White, a 30-year-old widow of the Reverend White of Falmouth. In what has been described as convenient union, Mrs. White helps Lawry to raise his 3 young children, Henry, Elizabeth, and Mary. So at some stage, the care of the children must have gone from his mother and sister to this Mrs. White. The couple have no children of their own, and for over 15 years, Lawry continues to conduct a vigorous ministry in southwest England and is variously appointed to St Austell, Gwyn, Knapp, Redruth, Falmouth, Helston, Exeter, Dudley, and Burslem. In most locations, he is given the position of superintendent of the circuit. He also eventually becomes chairman of the Exeter district and is particularly influential in that region. His warm, forceful, direct preaching style is popular and draws large numbers of hearers and converts, including over 1,000 people reported at a single gathering. Goes on to say intense public support for Methodism in Cornwall during this period is based on its capacity to form a bridge between the old and the new, and the tradition and modernity. Lawry by now is considered a senior and highly experienced figure in British Wesleyan ranks, and accepts an appointment as president of the New Zealand General Wesleyan Conference, and sails to Auckland with his family aboard the ship Bucephalus. District meeting at Mangungu, New Zealand in 1843 had requested London to send a person of long-standing experience and notability to uphold the interests of Methodism and yet give no offence, and Lawry is deemed to fit the bill. Yeah. So Lawry and his family arrived in Sydney in January 1844 and travelled on to Auckland in March of 1844, and he's now aged 51. In 1845, he visits the lower North Island and upper South Island. He has 2 visits to Tonga and Fiji and some of the surrounding islands. First one in 1847 and the second one in 1850. In Auckland, he established an institution for the training of native boys and girls, teachers and ministers, the outcome of which was the model school at Three Kings and Wesley College in Auckland. There, a large number of youths were trained in English education, Christian knowledge, and industrial pursuits. After 10 quite often difficult years in Auckland, stress and increasing ill health, he retired to Sydney and 2 years later moved to a new house in Parramatta and suffered a stroke. He died aged 67. The burial site is named the Walter Lawry Methodist Memorial Park. He was predeceased by his daughter Elizabeth. So that's the surviving one, who died aged 33, leaving a husband and 5 children. Survived by son Henry Hassall, Mary Australia, and 21 grandchildren. I think he had a total of about 26, but some must have predeceased him. We do have a few artifacts from Henry in particular. There's 2 books, The Friendly and Visit to the Friendly Islands, and a second book, The Second Visit to the Friendly Island and Fiji Islands. Have a large brass microscope, telescope, 2 small china paintings, and his walking stick. So that basically deals with Walter's career. So I don't know if you had any other questions or comments on that one.
Well, thanks very much, Spencer. Look, I'm sure there are some questions. So I'll just hand over mostly to maybe Sarah, Barbara, and others who may have some questions or some additional stories to share with us.
I don't think you can hear me.
We can hear you. Yes, we can hear you.
You can
Yes.
hear me. All right.
Yes.
Apparently Walter was a very charismatic person, and interestingly enough, that seems to have gone right down through the generations. My father and some of my grandsons have got the same very charismatic way of not taking things too seriously, having a great personality in a way. And I think Walter said himself that he didn't feel he was particularly spiritual, but he had very good intentions, but he didn't pretend to be a highly spiritual minister as such. But he loved people, and he was very intelligent. Apparently, he read a lot, and was very, very popular, as Courtney said. But I think Mary was the one that really must have suffered incredible hardship in Tonga, having little children, a little boy, and then babies on the way. And I think the book, The Currency Lass, makes it very clear the way really what life must have been for her at that stage. And then to die so young, and I think Henry Hassall was brought up and spent a lot of his young years in a boarding school, which was pretty tough for a little boy who'd lost his mother to suddenly be in a boarding school. But there's lots of very fascinating stories.
Yes, that's an interesting comment. Elizabeth Raylan writes an interesting comment in this book with biographical details of Parramatta's Pacific missionaries, so on and so on. It should be noted that the input of mission wives and daughters is amongst the most underrated elements in historical analysis of early Pacific missionary effort. As avowed coadjutors in their husbands' and fathers' international placements, they were very faithful and learned new languages, conducted pastoral visits, established mothers' groups in schools, managed heavy physical work, liaised with local people in ways which richly served God and the Methodist cause. In fact, in the sphere of missionary effort in the South Seas, these women were its glue, living, working, witnessing to their faith and birthing in environments underpinned by convictism, cannibalism, and the harsh realities of colonial politics and moral lassitude. I had to look that word up, which means morals have sort of all slipped away. Meant they prevailed against all odds with a genuine courage. You made an interesting point there, Barbara. Mary herself said she thought it was easier for her in Tonga than it was for Walter, because she could continue to look after her children and do meals and cleaning and other stuff that people normally do. But Walter was at a complete loss because he effectively felt he had nothing to do. He couldn't really come to grips with the language as well as he would have liked. Singleton sort of lost interest in having to translate the gospel. And Walter ended up sort of, highlight of his week was preaching to the converted, his own sort of 5 followers, his family, and he got quite down about that. And at some point, he was even writing about death and his own death, and if the St Michael didn't come back, was he going to die on Tonga? And he got very down at one point. So I think there was no doubt that Mary was the glue that held things together.
It's interesting with their son Henry Hassall, was he? Henry Hassall. He was a fluent Maori speaker.
Mm.
He was fluent in the Maori language,
Yes.
and he was a Wesleyan Methodist missionary, I think up in, is it Tuamatu? It's up by just near the airport is in Mary.
Yeah.
So that's fantastic. You know, he was a missionary minister there to the Maori people. He was actually he was living and breathing the Maori people there.
Yes.
So he must have picked up a lot of language skills from even being with the Tongan boys, little children.
Yes.
I think that's so. And there's some really interesting stories about Henry Hassall. He had a fascinating wife, obviously, who was obviously had heaps of personality. But the story, I don't know whether you have heard the story of Henry Hassall and what he was sort of an intermissary between some of the Maori tribes. Mm-hmm. And there was one story which is quite well documented.
It's a very dramatic story.
Yeah, it is.
Just like to ask Graham, it's a very dramatic story. I haven't sort of planned to put it on. I'm very aware of it. Do we have time for that one?
By all means. But I also want to suggest that in a future session, we can go into detail about the children, and that's the third generation of the family. So by all means, Spencer, tell us that story. Barbara started to introduce it. Maybe the two of you can tell the story. So and then we can get further stories in a later session that we do.
Yeah, well, you feel welcome. The only problem is if we want to do another session, I probably wouldn't have so much to. But you tell the story, Barbara, and I'll see how we go.
Well, as I understand it, and this has come through Lucy Marshall, who is a cousin of ours, who has since deceased, but one of our other relations had a business in Auckland, or has a business in Auckland, and he had a Maori taha, which is a carved, quite a tall carved, not a sword, but a pole. And he said to one of his workmen, this has got a story to it, this pole. Could you look at it? You understand what is written on it. Can you tell me what it is? Because what I think it is that Henry Hassall had one of the local chiefs came to Henry Hassall one day and said, the very powerful tribe from the north is going to come down and attack us, and they are more powerful, greater than we are, and they will undoubtedly win the battle, and that'll be the end of us. What can you do for us? And Henry thought about it, and he said, well, we'll pray about it, which they did. And Henry said to this chief, now, when the other tribe comes, the first thing that will happen is that they will perform the haka, the Maori haka, war haka, which is meant to scare the daylights out of you. And what I want you to do is to get your tribe to learn a peace haka. And this chief said, oh, no, we don't do that. He said, well, this is what I feel you should do. So the local chief got his tribe together, and Henry Hassall, reading from the scripture particularly, taught them a new haka, which was peace. Well, the tribe from Northland came down and did their great haka, and then Henry's group came forward and they did a peace haka. And the first lots said, well, that's not right. So they did a more ferocious haka, and again they came back and they did this peace haka. And I think this happened 3 times.
Yeah.
And then Henry went out in the middle of it and preached the gospel, and the Northland tribe virtually said, well, this is a waste of time. We're not going to get anywhere. So they made friends, and I could imagine they would have gone and had a huge big feed, and that was that. And but this complete story was written on this taha, and this was so it was verified by the actual Maori people themselves. I think that's bare bones of what the story was. What do you think, Graham?
Thank you for that. This is great. This is good to get these stories. So thank you so much for that, Barbara. So I just want to check if there's any more questions for Spencer or any comments to add to tonight.
No, probably the only comment thing that interested me was probably a bit off subject, but Roland Hassall appeared to do very well, and I think the job he had in that store, the government stores, would have been very responsible. But with the farms that he had, he was probably in a position to provide a lot of the goods that were required for his store, which would make him probably a significant amount of money. So he appeared to be a very good, shrewd businessman, I suspect.
The one other interesting story I've always thought was Henry Hassall's wife, Hepzibah. She was sent out, she was an orphan and was sent out to New Zealand, and her brothers lived in New Zealand and they paid her fare. And she came out and she was to marry, they were going to find her somebody to marry. But on the way, she fell in love with the captain. And the brothers were horrified at this. They said, we don't know what this captain is like. He could be absolutely hopeless. We have to verify him in Britain. In the meantime, Henry's sister had decided that Hepzibah was the girl for her brother. And so there was quite a bit of matchmaking going on between the sister and her brother. And Hepzibah was apparently a very attractive girl, but she had decided that she was going to go back to England and marry the captain. But the captain then, so the brothers said to the captain, well, he has to go back. We won't allow this to happen to our sister until your credentials have been checked out. The short story was that he came back, and in the meantime, this Henry's sister had said to him, look, if you want to marry Hepzibah, you'll have to be quick because this captain is coming in the next couple of days, and he will, if you want Hepzibah, you'd better get on with it. So he duly did. He was apparently quite shy, but he married Hepzibah, and they were quite a force to be reckoned with in Auckland area, I believe. So endeth the romantic story.
How are you related, Barbara? Because I'm Lucy's daughter.
Oh, are you?
Yeah.
Well,
daughter.
Lucy was my first cousin.
Ah,
My father was Rollo, who was the youngest of,
right.
yes.
Of course.
And yes, so Lucy gave me a lot of her papers. So
Okay.
I've probably got some that you should have.
No, we've got enough. We've got a lot. Yeah. Oh, that's nice to meet you. Mm.
Yeah, we three have all come down through Henry Hassall and then Henry Robert.
So we're seventh generation, I thought.
From
Henry,
From the
Mary Cover.
no, from the
from the Walter Lawry.
Hassall. Hassall.
The
Hassall.
I thought that Walter Lawry was my third great grandfather.
correct.
Yeah, he's my second great grandfather, isn't he?
Mm. Yes. Yeah. Mm.
Because I'm the youngest in the and I think Courtney and I are the only two remaining cousins. There were 8 of us in our family, 2 in Courtney and his sister and Lucy. So there were only 11 grandchildren or great-grandchildren.
Courtney, she referring to as my father.
Yes.
Yes. I'm sorry, Spencer. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, well, Courtney was my cousin and
Yes.
Lucy was my cousin.
Oh, interesting. Mm.
So I'm the last of the Mohicans.
Mm.
Yes, we're of the 8 children that Henry Hassall had, we're both descended from the same one.
That's right.
Robert.
Well, Spencer, I want to thank you very much for this presentation tonight, and with your research assistant, Sue, who keeps you on track there, and with your cousins who assist with stories, and also let us know that there is quite a reservoir of historical information within your family. And we look forward to future presentations, not only of the Lawry line, but also of other Hassall descendants who live in New Zealand. And we look forward to the possibility of a future event somewhere in New Zealand at one of the convenient locations where you can meet, and maybe others can join you, so that we can have a few days together to hear more of these stories. So can everybody just express their thanks to Spencer for this presentation this evening, maybe with a clap or a hands up or whatever we want to do on screen. But thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank you,
it.
Grant.
Thank you.